At 6 a.m., I woke to the chilling sound of my front door lock clicking. Someone was trying to get in. Through the peephole, I saw her, our HOA president, clutching a shiny master key, her face twisted with smug certainty. This wasn't a neighborly visit. For months, she'd terrorized our quiet cul-de-sac with petty fines and bizarre rules, but now she was crossing a line into my home. My heart raced as the lock turned. What was she after? Why my house? One thing was clear. She didn't expect what was waiting inside. Want to know how a nosy HOA tyrant got her comeuppance? Keep watching. This gets wild. The moving truck rumbled to a stop in front of our new home in Willow Creek, a postcard-perfect subdivision with tidy lawns and white picket fences. My wife Sarah and I, Ethan, had spent years saving for this place. A cozy two-story with a wraparound porch, the kind of house where you'd raise kids and host barbecues. I'm a high school math teacher, and Sarah's a nurse. We're not flashy people, just a couple chasing a quiet life. The neighborhood felt like a dream. Kids biking down the street, neighbors waving from their driveways, and a community board promising harmony through standards. It sounded nice, like a place where everyone looked out for each other. Our first week was a blur of unpacking boxes and painting walls. Sarah planted tulips by the mailbox, and I hung a porch swing, picturing lazy Sunday mornings with coffee and her laughter. The neighbors seemed friendly enough. Mrs. Larson next door brought over a casserole, and a guy across the street offered to lend me his lawnmower. But there was one person who stood out, Margaret, the HOA president. She introduced herself on day 3, striding up our driveway with a clipboard and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her welcome packet was thicker than a textbook, stuffed with rules about grass height, paint colors, and even the approved angle for mailbox posts. "We keep Willow Creek pristine," she said, her tone sharp like she was sizing us up. I brushed it off. New neighborhood, new quirks. Sarah and I were too busy settling in to worry about Margaret's rule book. We wanted to fit in, maybe host a game night, blend into this suburban paradise. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Margaret's eyes lingered too long on our unpainted garage door, her pen tapping her clipboard like a countdown. Something told me our dream home was about to become a battleground, and we didn't even know the war had started. The first notice arrived a week after we settled into Willow Creek, slipped under our door like an unwanted guest. It was a crisp, official-looking letter from the HOA, citing our mailbox for being 0.5 inches too tall per regulation 4.2.1. Sarah laughed it off, thinking it was a typo. Who measures half an inch? I wasn't so sure. As a math teacher, I'm used to precision, so I grabbed a tape measure. Margaret was right. Our mailbox, a sturdy black post we'd inherited from the previous owner, was exactly half an inch over the limit. I fixed it that afternoon, grumbling but willing to play along. New neighborhood, new rules, right? Keep the peace. But peace didn't last. 2 days later, another notice appeared, this time about our garage door. Its forest green paint, which we hadn't gotten around to changing, was non-compliant with approved color palette 7B. The letter demanded we repaint within 72 hours or face a $200 fine. Sarah's nursing shifts were grueling that week, and I was drowning in lesson plans. But we scraped together time to buy the correct shade, dove gray per the HOA's 47-page color guide. We spent our Saturday repainting, sweat dripping under the August sun, while Margaret watched from her porch across the street, her clipboard never far from her hands. Her gaze felt like a laser, tracking every brushstroke. I started noticing her more after that. Margaret wasn't just the HOA president. She was Willow Creek's self-appointed sheriff. She'd patrol the neighborhood in her golf cart, her silver hair pulled tight in a bun, jotting notes about crooked shutters or overgrown hedges. Neighbors whispered about her over backyard fences, how she'd fined the Wilsons $500 for leaving Christmas lights up past January 15th, or how she'd measured the Parkers' lawn with a ruler to enforce the 2.5-inch grass height rule. "She's obsessive," Mrs. Larson told me one evening, her voice low. "But she's got the board wrapped around her finger. Nobody challenges her." The notices kept coming. Our tulips were unapproved flora. Fine, $50. Our trash cans were out 20 minutes early on pickup day, $75. One letter even claimed our porch swings creak was a noise violation, $100. Each fine stung, eating into our savings, but what hurt more was the helplessness. Sarah and I weren't rule breakers. We just wanted to live our lives. Yet every morning I'd check the doorstep, dreading another cream-colored envelope with Margaret's perfect cursive signature. It was like living under surveillance, every move scrutinized. 3 months in, things escalated. I came home from school to find Margaret standing in our driveway, photographing our front yard. Her golf cart was parked at an angle, blocking our access. "Ethan," she said, not looking up from her camera, "your hedge exceeds regulation height by 1.3 inches. I'm documenting for the board." I clenched my jaw, trying to stay calm. "Margaret, we trimmed it last week. It's within code." She snapped another photo, her lips curling into a smile that made my skin crawl. "The board will decide that. Compliance is non-negotiable." That night, Sarah found me pacing the kitchen. "She's targeting us," I said. "This isn't about hedges or mailboxes. It's personal." Sarah's eyes darkened. "Then let's fight back." We're not her punching bag. We started digging. Sarah, with her nurse's knack for precision, combed through the HOA bylaws, a dense 80-page document that read like it was written to confuse. She found loopholes, rules requiring board approval for fines over $100 or mandates for transparent documentation of violations. Armed with this, we requested a hearing to contest the fines. The board meeting was held in the community center, a sterile room with flickering fluorescent lights. Margaret presided like a queen, flanked by 4 board members who nodded at her every word. Our neighbors filled the seats, some curious, others avoiding eye contact. I presented our case, citing bylaw violations and showing photos of our offending hedge, which was clearly within limits. Margaret didn't flinch. "The board appreciates your effort, Ethan, but standards must be upheld." The fine stood. The room felt smaller as neighbors shuffled out, leaving us with a $425 bill and a sinking feeling we'd poked a bear. The next week, Margaret upped the ante. A new letter arrived, this one different, thicker, with a legal seal. It demanded an emergency interior inspection of our home to verify compliance with structural standards. The phrasing was vague, but the threat was clear. Margaret wanted access to our house. My stomach churned. This wasn't about tulips or paint colors anymore. It was an invasion. Sarah's hands shook as she read the letter aloud. "She can't do this, can she? Enter our home? I didn't know." But the idea of Margaret crossing our threshold, clipboard in hand, felt like a violation of everything we'd worked for. We locked our doors that night, double-checking the bolts, but sleep didn't come easy. The following morning, I caught Margaret outside our house again, this time with a man in a work jacket carrying a toolbox. She was pointing at our front door, gesturing like she owned the place. I stormed outside, heart pounding. "What's this about, Margaret?" She held up a form, her voice dripping with authority. "Structural safety check. Your door's locking mechanism may not meet code. We're here to replace it." The man shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. "Replace my lock?" "You're not touching my house." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Refusal to comply triggers a $1,000 fine and potential legal action." "Your choice, Ethan." I stood my ground, but the toolbox man's presence felt like a threat. Was she really going to force her way in? What kind of power did she have? The harassment intensified. One night, at 2 a.m., we woke to a loud scraping at our front door. I grabbed my phone, heart racing, and peered through the peephole. Margaret was there, alone, trying keys in our lock, dozens of them, each tagged with addresses. My blood ran cold. This wasn't an inspection. It was an obsession. I filmed her through the window, her face illuminated by her phone's flashlight, muttering about non-compliance. Sarah called the police, but by the time they arrived, Margaret was gone, leaving only scratches on our lock as evidence. The officer, a tired-looking guy named Jenkins, sighed. "HOA disputes are civil, not criminal. File a complaint with the board." The board. Margaret's board. Sarah started researching Margaret's background that night, her laptop glowing in the dark as we sat at the kitchen table. Public records showed Margaret had moved to Willow Creek 2 years ago, buying her house in cash. No mortgage, no loans. Odd for someone with no listed job beyond HOA president. There were gaps in her history, no employment records before Willow Creek, like she'd appeared out of nowhere. "This feels wrong," Sarah whispered, scrolling through dead-end searches. "Who is she, really?" The more we dug, the more questions piled up, and the tighter Margaret's grip on our lives seemed to grow. The next day, a $2,000 fine arrived for obstructing community safety protocols. Attached was a photo of our front door, time-stamped from that night. She was documenting us, building a case, turning our home into her battlefield. Sarah's face was pale as she read the letter. "She's not stopping, Ethan. She's coming for everything." I felt the walls closing in, our dream home turning into a prison. But Sarah's eyes burned with something new, determination. "We're not running," she said. "We'll expose her." Expose her how? And what was Margaret hiding that made her so relentless? The answer was closer than we thought, but it would cost us everything to find it. The air in our Willow Creek home felt thick with unspoken dread that fateful morning, the kind of tension that presses on your chest like an invisible weight. It was 6 a.m., the sky still bruised with pre-dawn shadows, when the unmistakable click of our front door lock shattered the silence. Sarah and I bolted upright in bed, our hearts sinking in frantic rhythm. We'd changed the locks twice in the past month, installed deadbolts and cameras after Margaret's nighttime prowling, but somehow, deep down, we knew this moment was inevitable. The scraping of metal on metal echoed through the house like a predator's claws testing its prey. I grabbed my phone, fingers trembling as I pulled up the security feed. There she was, Margaret, her silver bun glinting under the porch light, sliding a gleaming master key into the slot with the precision of someone who'd done this before. Not just to us, but to others, her tagged keyring dangling like trophies from past conquests. My stomach twisted into knots. This wasn't another petty fine or driveway standoff. This was full invasion, the peak of her relentless campaign to break us. For months, her rules had chipped away at our sanity. The half-inch mailbox violations, the color-coded paint demands, the fines that drained our savings like blood from a wound. But now, with that key turning smoothly, betraying our last line of defense, frustration boiled over into raw anger. How had she gotten a copy? The locksmith she'd brought weeks ago, the one we'd chased off, had he duplicated it before leaving? Or was this part of her deeper game, the one we'd glimpsed in her blank digital footprint, her cash-bought house, her unexplained authority? Sarah's hand found mine under the sheets, her nurse's calm cracking for the first time. "Ethan, she's in," she whispered. But her voice held an edge, a quiet steel I'd only heard in her most exhausting shifts at the hospital. We didn't run or hide. Instead, we crept downstairs, barefoot on the cold hardwood, the house we'd poured our dreams into now feeling like a trap. The door creaked open, and Margaret stepped inside, her golf cart idling outside like a getaway vehicle. She clutched her ever-present clipboard, but her free hand held a flashlight, sweeping the beam across our living room as if cataloging evidence for some imagined crime. Her face was a mask of triumph, eyes narrowed in that smug certainty that had haunted our every move. "Emergency compliance verification," she announced to the empty air, her voice echoing off the walls we'd painted ourselves. But this was no verification. It was domination, the HOA's iron fist finally smashing through our privacy. My blood surged with fury. This woman, this self-crowned tyrant, had turned our sanctuary into her battlefield, fining us into submission, watching us like prey, and now violating the one space that was ours. I stepped forward from the shadows of the hallway, my voice low and shaking with barely contained rage. "Get out, Margaret! This is breaking and entering!" She whipped around, her flashlight blinding me for a split second. But instead of shock, her expression hardened into entitlement. "You obstructed safety protocols, Ethan. The board authorizes full access for non-compliant properties." Her words dripped with false authority. But I saw the flicker in her eyes, the thrill of power abused, the pettiness elevated to obsession. She advanced, shining the light on our furniture, our photos, our life, as if measuring it all for dismantling. The fines had been bad enough, stacking up to over $4,000 now, forcing Sarah to pick up extra shifts, and meet a tutor after hours just to keep afloat. But this was the peak, her boot on our necks, grinding down the last shreds of our dignity. Sarah emerged from the kitchen then, her silhouette backlit by the faint glow of dawn seeping through the windows. She moved with a purpose I'd never seen, not frantic but deliberate, her hands steady as if prepping for surgery. In one fist, she held a thick folder, pages upon pages of documents she'd compiled in secret during those late nights at her laptop. Margaret froze mid-step, her flashlight beam locking onto the folder like a spotlight on her undoing. "What's this?" she demanded, but her voice wavered, the smugness cracking. Sarah didn't flinch. She'd been the quiet force through all this, the one poring over public records while I paced in frustration, uncovering Margaret's ghosts, the unreported income, the forged board signatures, the complaints from 3 previous neighborhoods where she'd been ousted for embezzlement and harassment. But Sarah had gone deeper, connecting dots to a web of fraud, Margaret siphoning HOA funds into personal accounts, using fines as her personal ATM, targeting newcomers like us to pad her pockets while hiding behind bylaws she'd twisted into weapons. The room pulsed with electric tension as Sarah opened the folder, her voice cutting through the air like a scalpel. "This is your arrest warrant, Margaret, for fraud, embezzlement, and criminal trespass." Time seemed to stretch, the words hanging heavy. Margaret's face drained of color, her body locking rigid as if electrocuted. The clipboard slipped from her grasp, clattering to the floor in slow motion, papers scattering like confessions. This was the bombshell, the turning point where her abuse of power crumbled under its own weight. For so long she'd wielded the HOA like a crown, humiliating families with her tape measures and notices, driving some to sell their homes just to escape. But Sarah, my unassuming nurse wife, had become our avenger, collaborating anonymously with state investigators after discovering Margaret's pattern of theft. The master key wasn't just for show, it was evidence of her breaking into other homes to plant violations or steal proof of her scams. Margaret's eyes darted wildly from the warrant to the open door, where neighbors were starting to gather, drawn by the golf cart's hum and our raised voices. Humiliation burned across her face, the public exposure she'd inflicted on others now turning inward. She lunged for the key ring still in her hand, as if clutching it could salvage her empire, but Sarah stepped closer, her presence commanding the space. "You've stolen thousands from this community, Margaret. Faked fines, forged documents, even keyed into homes to cover your tracks. The police are on their way." The words landed like blows, each one stripping away layers of her facade. Margaret staggered back, her breath coming in ragged gasps, the tyrant reduced to a cornered animal. Frustration that had simmered in me for months erupted into vindication, a hot rush of triumph as I watched her empire fracture. We'd been helpless, fined into near ruin, our dream tainted by her pettiness, but now the tables turned with brutal finality. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder, sealing her fate. Margaret's legs buckled, and she sank against the wall, her master key tumbling to the floor amid the scattered papers, keys to a dozen homes, each one a violation waiting to be exposed. The neighborhood watched from lawns and porches, phones raised, capturing the fall of their oppressor. Anger gave way to a surging wave of relief, but it was bittersweet. Our home bore the scars of her war, our trust in community shattered. Sarah's hand found mine again, her grip firm, a silent promise that we'd rebuild. Margaret looked up, eyes wide with terror, realizing too late that her key had unlocked her own downfall. As the police cars pulled up, lights flashing across our violated living room, one question hung in the air. Would justice finally heal the wounds she'd inflicted? Or had the damage gone too deep? As the sirens wailed closer, piercing the early morning hush of Willow Creek, Margaret's collapse against our living room wall marked the end of her reign. The once unassailable HOA president, with her clipboard empire and tape measure tyranny, now huddled in a heap, her master key lying discarded amid the chaos of scattered papers. The neighbors, drawn by the flashing lights and the unusual commotion in our quiet cul-de-sac, clustered on their lawns, phones aloft, capturing the spectacle that would soon ripple through community chats and local news feeds. Officer Jenkins, the same weary cop who'd dismissed our earlier complaints as civil matters, arrived first, his expression shifting from routine boredom to wide-eyed surprise as he took in the scene. Behind him, 2 more officers flanked the doorway, their presence transforming our invaded home into a makeshift command center. Margaret's eyes, wild and unfocused, darted between them and the warrant in Sarah's hand, her body trembling as the reality sank in like quicksand. The arrest unfolded with a surreal efficiency that contrasted sharply with the months of slow-burning harassment we'd endured. Jenkins read Margaret her rights in a steady monotone, cuffing her wrists with a click that echoed like finality. She didn't resist, didn't spout more justifications about community standards or emergency protocols. Instead, she deflated, her silver bun unraveling slightly as they led her out to the patrol car. The golf cart she'd arrived in sat abandoned in our driveway, a pathetic relic of her patrols, now evidence in the unfolding case. Sarah and I stood on the porch, arms linked, watching as the car pulled away, its lights painting the neighborhood in strobing red and blue. Vindication washed over us in waves, hot and sweet after so long in the grip of helplessness. The fines that had drained our bank account, the nights of whispered fears, the erosion of our dream, all culminating in this moment of reversal. But beneath the triumph lurked a hollow ache. Our home, once a haven, bore invisible scars from her intrusions, reminders that trust in neighbors could fracture as easily as a lock. Word spread like wildfire through Willow Creek. By noon, the community center buzzed with emergency meetings, residents who'd long suffered in silence, finally voicing their grievances. Margaret's embezzlement scheme unraveled publicly. She'd siphoned over $150,000 in HOA dues over 2 years, fabricating fines to line her pockets while enforcing absurd rules to distract from her theft. The master key collection, seized as evidence, revealed she'd duplicated keys from multiple homes, using them to plant fake violations or pilfer documents that could expose her. Investigators discovered her history, a trail of similar scams in 3 other states, where she'd posed as a vigilant community leader only to fleece the funds and flee when suspicions mounted. Her cash purchase of the house? Laundered proceeds from prior frauds. The absurdity of it all hit hard. A woman who'd nitpicked mailbox heights and tulip varieties was a calculated criminal, her pettiness a smokescreen for greed. For Sarah and I, the immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of statements and interviews. We spent hours at the police station, recounting every notice, every driveway confrontation, every scratch on our lock. Sarah's folder, meticulously compiled, became the cornerstone of the prosecution. Bank records, forged signatures, anonymous tips from former neighbors she'd targeted. Her nurse's precision had turned detective, cross-referencing public databases and HOA minutes to expose the rot. The fines we'd paid? Refunded in full, plus interest, as the board dissolved under scrutiny. But the emotional toll lingered. Sarah's extra shifts had left her exhausted, her laughter rarer. My teaching had suffered. Lesson plans rushed amid the stress. We walked through our house differently now, double-checking doors out of habit, the porch swing creaking like a ghost of simpler times. Yet, in the quiet evenings that followed, we rebuilt, repainting the garage door in a defiant shade of blue, now board-approved but chosen freely, replanting tulips without fear of fines. Our bond, tested in the fire of adversity, emerged stronger, a testament to how shared battles could forge unbreakable alliances. The long-term consequences rippled far beyond our driveway. Willow Creek's HOA underwent a complete overhaul. A new board was elected, transparent, resident-led, with term limits and audited finances to prevent another Margaret. Rules were streamlined. No more half-inch mailbox mandates or noise violations for creaky swings. Instead, focus shifted to genuine community needs. Playground upgrades, neighborhood watches that protected rather than policed. Fines dropped dramatically, replaced by voluntary guidelines and mediation for disputes. Neighbors who'd avoided us during the height of Margaret's smear campaign, whispering about our non-compliance, now stopped by with apologies and casseroles, sharing their own stories of her bullying. The Wilsons, fined into near foreclosure for holiday lights, joined a class action suit that recovered thousands. The Parkers, whose lawn she'd measured obsessively, hosted the first post-Margaret block party, where laughter drowned out memories of her golf cart patrols. Margaret's trial, 6 months later, was a media circus in our small town. She pleaded guilty to reduced charges: fraud, embezzlement, trespassing, avoiding a drawn-out spectacle but not the shame. Sentenced to 5 years in prison and restitution payments that stripped her of her ill-gotten home, she became a cautionary tale splashed across local headlines. HOA Tyrant behind bars, how one woman's greed fractured a community. Her fall sparked statewide reforms. Legislators, prompted by our story's viral spread on social media, introduced bills mandating HOA transparency and resident protections against abusive boards. Online forums buzzed with similar tales, empowering others to challenge their own Margarets. For us, the publicity was double-edged. Interviews on morning shows painted us as heroes, but we craved normalcy. I returned to teaching with renewed vigor, incorporating lessons on ethics and community into my math classes, using fine calculations as metaphors for overreach. Sarah, inspired by her investigative role, pursued certification in forensic nursing, turning her ordeal into a career pivot that healed others. Yet the deepest impact was personal, etched into the fabric of our lives. We sold the house a year later, not out of defeat but choice. Willow Creek, though reformed, held too many echoes of violation. Every creak in the floorboards reminded us of that dawn intrusion. We moved to a rural acreage, free from HOAs, where our new home overlooked fields instead of manicured lawns. No more notices under the door? No clipboard-wielding overseers? Sarah's tulips bloomed wildly, untamed by rules, and my porch swing hung without restriction. Our savings, bolstered by the refunds and a small settlement from the suit, funded the down payment, turning loss into liberation. The experience reshaped us, more vigilant, less trusting of surface harmony, but profoundly grateful for the resilience it unearthed. We hosted gatherings now with old Willow Creek friends, toasting to survival over barbecues, sharing laughs about the absurdity of it all, the woman who'd measured hedges with a ruler, exposed as a thief by a nurse's late-night sleuthing. In the quiet moments, as we watched sunsets from our new porch, the takeaway crystallized like a hard-won truth. HOA disputes with their petty rules and power plays aren't just about grass heights or paint shades. They're battles for autonomy, reminders that community thrives on fairness, not control. Margaret's downfall proved that even the most entrenched tyrants crumble when ordinary people push back with persistence and proof. But it also highlighted the cost, the eroded trust, the financial strain, the emotional scars that linger long after the sirens fade. In the end, our story wasn't just about one Karen and her master key. It was a warning that behind every pristine suburb lurks the potential for unchecked authority to poison paradise. So if you've ever stared down a notice or felt a neighbor's gaze too keenly, remember, sometimes the key to freedom is exposing the locks that bind you. What HOA nightmare have you survived that changed everything?